In 1969, two young entrepreneurs named Angelo Mozilo and David Loeb had a vision that would fundamentally reshape the American dream and ultimately destroy it. They founded Countrywide Financial Corporation with $20,000 in startup capital, operating out of a modest office in Calabasas, California. Their mission seemed noble enough: to make home ownership accessible to every American, regardless of their financial background. Mozilo, the son of a butcher from the Bronx, understood what it meant to struggle for the American dream. He believed that owning a home was a fundamental right, not a privilege reserved for the wealthy. What started as a small savings and loan association would grow into the largest mortgage lender in America, originating over $1.5 trillion in loans during its peak years. By 2007, Countrywide was funding 1 in 5 mortgages across the United States, employing over 60,000 people and operating more than 700 retail locations nationwide. The company's orange and blue logo became as recognizable as any major brand in America, symbolizing hope and opportunity for millions of aspiring homeowners. But beneath this veneer of success lay a systematic approach to lending that would prove catastrophic not just for borrowers, but for the entire global financial system. Angelo Mozilo became the face of Countrywide, known for his perpetual tan and his evangelical belief in expanding homeownership. His philosophy was simple yet dangerous. Traditional lending standards were discriminatory barriers that prevented deserving Americans from achieving their dreams. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Mozilo positioned himself as a champion of minority lending and affordable housing, often clashing publicly with banking regulators who questioned his aggressive lending practices. He served on numerous government panels and advisory boards, including the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco, where he advocated for looser lending standards and reduced regulatory oversight. Mozilo's compensation reflected his company's explosive growth, with his total earnings reaching $140 million between 2000 and 2008. His personal wealth exceeded $600 million at the company's peak, making him one of the highest-paid executives in America. Behind closed doors, however, internal emails would later reveal a different side of Mozilo, one who privately acknowledged the toxic nature of his company's loan products while publicly promoting them as innovative solutions to housing affordability. Countrywide's business model was built on a fundamental shift in how mortgages were originated and distributed. Unlike traditional banks that held loans on their books until maturity, Countrywide pioneered the originate-to-distribute model, where loans were quickly packaged and sold to investors through securitization. This approach allowed the company to generate fees up front while transferring the long-term risk to others, creating perverse incentives that prioritized volume over quality. The company's loan officers were compensated based on the number and profitability of loans they originated, with higher-risk loans often generating higher commissions. Countrywide developed an extensive menu of exotic loan products designed to qualify borrowers who couldn't afford traditional mortgages, including interest-only loans, option-adjustable-rate mortgages, and stated income loans that required no documentation of a borrower's actual earnings. The company's fast-qual system could approve loans in under 12 minutes, often without human review, relying on automated underwriting systems that prioritized speed over scrutiny. By 2006, Countrywide was originating over $450 billion in loans annually, with approximately 40% of these being subprime or Alt-A loans to borrowers with poor credit or limited documentation. The company's most destructive innovation was the development of so-called ninja loans, an industry acronym for mortgages granted to borrowers with no income, no job, and no assets verification. These stated income loans, which Countrywide internally referred to as liar loans, allowed borrowers to simply declare their income without providing pay stubs, tax returns, or employment verification. Option ARM loans became another Countrywide specialty, offering borrowers multiple payment choices each month, including payments that didn't even cover the interest owed, causing the loan balance to actually increase over time through negative amortization. The company aggressively marketed these products as affordable solutions for first-time homebuyers and those looking to upgrade to larger homes, often failing to explain the long-term consequences of payment resets and principal increases. Countrywide's sales culture was notoriously aggressive, with loan officers trained to overcome borrower objections and push them toward the most profitable loan products rather than those best suited to their financial situation. The company maintained a VIP program called Friends of Angelo, which provided preferential lending terms to politicians, regulators, and other influential figures, including several United States senators and the former CEO of Fannie Mae. Internal company documents later revealed that executives knew these loans were likely to default but continued originating them because they generated immediate profits through sales to secondary market investors. As housing prices soared throughout the early 2000s, Countrywide's aggressive lending practices appeared to be validated by ever-increasing home values that masked the underlying problems with borrower qualifications. The company expanded rapidly through acquisitions, purchasing numerous smaller mortgage companies and building a vertically integrated operation that included mortgage banking, real estate services, insurance, and loan servicing. Countrywide's stock price reflected this growth, rising from under $2 per share in the early 1990s to over $45 by 2007, making it one of the best-performing stocks in the financial sector. The company's success attracted major investors, including Bank of America, which purchased a $2 billion stake in 2006. Countrywide also developed close relationships with government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which purchased hundreds of billions of dollars worth of the company's mortgages for securitization. These relationships were so important to Countrywide's business model that the company employed dozens of former Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac executives and maintained offices near both organizations' headquarters. By 2007, Countrywide had originated over $3.5 trillion in mortgage loans since its founding, representing approximately 15% of all mortgages in the United States during its peak years. The first signs of trouble emerged in late 2006 when housing prices began to plateau and then decline in key markets like California, Florida, and Nevada, areas where Countrywide had been particularly active in subprime lending. As home values dropped, borrowers found themselves underwater on their mortgages, owing more than their homes were worth, which eliminated their ability to refinance or sell their way out of trouble. Default rates on Countrywide's loans began to spike dramatically, with subprime mortgages showing particularly high delinquency rates within months of origination. The company's stock price started to decline in early 2007 as investors became concerned about rising default rates and their impact on the company's financial condition. Internal emails from this period, later released during congressional investigations, showed Mozilo expressing alarm about the quality of Countrywide's loan portfolio, describing some products as toxic and predicting significant losses. Despite these private concerns, Countrywide continued to originate high-risk loans well into 2007, apparently hoping that housing prices would recover and validate their lending practices. The company also faced increasing scrutiny from state attorneys general and federal regulators who were investigating its lending practices and treatment of minority borrowers. The crisis accelerated rapidly throughout 2007 as the secondary market for mortgage-backed securities collapsed, leaving Countrywide unable to sell its loans to investors. The company was forced to hold billions of dollars in mortgages on its balance sheet, creating severe liquidity problems as defaults mounted and funding sources dried up. In August 2007, Countrywide experienced a classic bank run as depositors lined up outside branches to withdraw their savings, fearing the company's imminent collapse. The Federal Reserve was forced to cut interest rates and provide emergency lending facilities to prevent a broader panic, but Countrywide's position continued to deteriorate. The company's stock price fell from over $40 to under $10 in a matter of months, wiping out billions in shareholder value. Countrywide was forced to draw down its entire $11.5 billion credit line and seek additional emergency funding to meet its obligations. Angelo Mozilo began selling his personal stock holdings, disposing of over $100 million worth of shares while publicly expressing confidence in the company's future prospects. These sales would later be investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission as potential insider trading violations. Bank of America emerged as Countrywide's savior in January 2008, agreeing to acquire the troubled mortgage giant for $4 billion, a fraction of its former market value. The acquisition was structured as a stock deal that valued Countrywide shares at just $7.16 each, representing an 85% decline from the company's peak value. Bank of America CEO Ken Lewis defended the purchase as a strategic opportunity to gain market share in mortgage lending and expand the bank's retail presence, particularly in California where Countrywide had hundreds of branches. However, The acquisition would prove to be one of the worst deals in banking history, ultimately costing Bank of America over $50 billion in legal settlements, loan losses, and regulatory penalties related to Countrywide's toxic lending practices. The mortgage crisis that Countrywide helped create spread far beyond the company itself, triggering the collapse of Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, and numerous other financial institutions that had invested heavily in mortgage-backed securities. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which had purchased hundreds of billions of dollars in Countrywide loans, were forced into government conservatorship in September 2008 at a cost to taxpayers exceeding $100 billion. The human cost of Countrywide's practices was staggering, with millions of American families losing their homes to foreclosure as the housing bubble burst. Many of these borrowers had been steered into inappropriate loan products by Countrywide's aggressive sales practices, receiving mortgages they could never realistically afford to repay. The company's targeting of minority communities was particularly devastating, with studies showing that Countrywide charged higher rates and fees to African American and Hispanic borrowers, even when they qualified for better terms. The Department of Justice later described Countrywide's practices as the largest residential fair lending settlement in history, resulting in a $335 million penalty. Angelo Mozilo faced civil charges from the Securities and Exchange Commission for insider trading and securities fraud, ultimately paying $67.5 million in fines and penalties while being banned from serving as an officer or director of a public company. Despite these sanctions, Mozilo never admitted wrongdoing and avoided criminal prosecution, an outcome that outraged many who viewed him as one of the primary architects of the financial crisis. The Countrywide brand was quickly retired by Bank of America, which absorbed the company's operations into its existing mortgage division and spent years dealing with the legal and financial consequences of the acquisition. Countrywide's legacy extends far beyond its own corporate failure, serving as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing growth over prudent risk management. The company's originate-to-distribute model became the template for predatory lending practices throughout the mortgage industry, creating a race to the bottom in underwriting standards that infected the entire financial system. The securitization of Countrywide's toxic loans spread the company's problems globally, as banks and investment funds around the world purchased mortgage-backed securities that would later prove worthless. The resulting financial crisis required unprecedented government intervention, including the Troubled Asset Relief Program that cost taxpayers over $400 billion, and the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing programs that injected trillions of dollars into the financial system. Regulatory reforms enacted after the crisis, including the Dodd-Frank Act and the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, were direct responses to the predatory lending practices that Countrywide had pioneered and perfected. Today, Countrywide Financial Corporation exists only in the history books and legal settlements, a reminder that the pursuit of profit without regard for consequences can destroy not just individual companies, but entire economies. The American dream of homeownership that Angelo Mozilo claimed to champion became a nightmare for millions of families, proving that good intentions, when coupled with reckless execution and perverse incentives, can produce catastrophic results that reverberate for generations.